Okay, so the Assad regime, gone. Like that. It's a story decades in the making, but the ending? Man, nobody saw that coming. We've got intel reports, first-hand accounts, even some leaked documents, let's just say. Deep
Yes.
dive. Yeah, this one's going to change how you see the whole Middle East.
It really is remarkable how quickly power can just evaporate, even when it seems so entrenched.
You're telling me.
Yep.
Assad clinging on one minute, the next, poof, vanished. And now this group, I bet most folks couldn't even point to them on a map. They're running the show. And you add to this, you were there. Damascus, right before things went sideways, working for the CIA. What was that even like, living
And
there?
Damascus, back then, City of Whispers, seriously, you always felt eyes on you, every move you made. The Syrian security services, everywhere.
Not exactly a relaxing place to be then. I mean, was it like straight out of a spy movie?
Kinda, yeah. Four main branches, right? Political security, Air Force intelligence, general intelligence, and then military intelligence. Constant power struggle between them, spying on each other almost as much as they spied on everyone else. Assad, well, he kind of encouraged that whole paranoid vibe.
So this hub and spoke thing, each branch reports to Assad directly, but they're all competing. What's the logic there?
Control. Keep them divided, suspicious, no one group gets strong enough to be a threat. Pitting them against each other, that was his survival strategy.
Clever. Cynical, but clever. Worked for a while, though. So when did this whole control system start to come apart?
War. The war changed everything. Dragged on, pressure mounted. Assad had to lean on militias, these networks, to keep things from completely falling apart. Basically, handing off the state's power to groups he couldn't really control.
So trying to stay in power is what ultimately undermined him.
Wow, kind of poetic when you think about it. It is. The regime, a victim of its own tactics. Relying on those militias, it eroded the official security branches, and boom, corruption, criminals, warlords, drug lords, running wild.
Which brings us to Captagon. Some reports say that trade was raking in as much as the entire legitimate Syrian economy. Not exactly a good look, is it?
Not really, no, but Captagon's tricky. Some regime elements, yeah, definitely involved, but a lot of it. Outside Assad's control, he'd lost his grip on those networks. They were running the show.
Militias, criminals, basically a state within a state. No wonder it all fell apart so fast. Reminds me of Kabul, kind of.
Oh yeah, there are definitely parallels there. Both regimes, propped up by outside support, and when that went away, crumbled. Shows you what happens when power isn't built on, well, actual support from the people.
So Assad's out. Big question is, what now?
Right, and that brings us to who's in charge now. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. They're a fascinating group, let's put it that way, and their history, tied up with the whole Syrian mess from the beginning.
HTS, they started out as like an al-Qaeda offshoot.
Yep.
Tracing them back, it's al-Qaeda in Iraq. Their leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani, he's a bit of a mystery, honestly.
Sure.
Fought the U.S. in Iraq, Abu Ghraib prisoner, then leading al-Qaeda in Syria, early days of the war.
Hold on, he was with al-Qaeda in Syria then, turned on them.
Yep, surprised a lot of people. Broke away from the main al-Qaeda, renamed his group, first Jabhat Fateh al-Sham, then Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, even fought against other al-Qaeda groups in Syria.
So what? Changed his mind. Pragmatist. Saw which way the wind was blowing. Or just playing the long game. Rebrand, gain power.
That's the million-dollar question. Who knows what's going on in his head? His past. Yeah, it definitely raises concerns. But gotta look at what HTS has been up to recently. Running Idlib province. Their approach, surprisingly practical, you could say.
So jihadists to what? Administrators? Bureaucrats?
Not that simple, but yeah, kinda. Bureaucracy, providing services, even working with international groups. Okay, so mixed bag then. Moderated, sure, but what are they really after? Big question mark hanging over them. And the whole thing. Huge implications globally. Assad's fall, what's that mean for Russia, Iran? They were his big backers.
Definitely a blow to both. Put a lot of resources into keeping Assad afloat, both political and, well, military. But they're adaptable.
You think they might cut a deal with this new regime? Just to keep their influence in Syria.
Possible. Russia, they've got their interests. Naval base at Tartus, air base, that's their supply line for Africa. Could see them working with HTS, or at least letting them be, if it means they keep those.
And Iran. They've been all over Syria for years, backing Assad and all those Shia militias. What's their next move?
Iran, that's more complicated. Their whole game in Syria, it's about power in the region, pushing back against their rivals, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the whole crew. Assad falling weakens them, but they won't just walk away.
So the whole game's changed. Regime that seemed untouchable, gone. Group with a, shall we say, interesting past, now in control. And the big players, scrambling to figure out what to do.
It's a fascinating situation, no doubt about that, and unpredictable. Too early to say what happens next. But one thing's for sure, the Syrian people, for the first time in, well, a very long time, they've got a chance to decide their own future.
That's a powerful thought. But after all they've been through, the war, the division, the oppression, can they actually do it?
Yeah.
Build a new Syria. That's what we're going to dig into next
Yeah.
and explore what the future might hold right after this. It's wild, right? Like, the whole landscape shifted in Syria. Power vacuum, new guys in charge, nobody's quite sure what to make of them. And then you got all these global players trying to figure out, like, where they even stand now.
Uncertainty, yeah, that's the word for it. But we can't get lost in all the big picture stuff, you know? What about the people? Syrians, they've been through decades of this, oppression, war. What happens to them now?
Yeah, it's easy to focus on, like, the geopolitical chess game and forget about the millions of actual people living through this.
Yeah.
What are their stories telling us?
Well, those stories, they give you that ground level view, right?
Yeah.
The human side of all this. I read a report. There was this guy released from prison after, get this, over 40 years. He was locked up under Hafez al-Assad, the father. Comes out into this world he doesn't even recognize. Tech, everything totally different.
That's wow. Like a time traveler, practically.
Oh, yeah.
Stepping out of a Syria that doesn't even exist anymore.
Mm.
Really puts it in perspective, you know?
Yeah.
It changes how much people have endured.
It does. His story and so many others, they remind us what this conflict has cost, the human cost, rebuilding a country. After all that war, the divisions, the trauma, it's not going to be easy.
Nope. Can be challenges, setbacks, probably more conflict too.
Mm-hmm.
Deep divisions, the wounds run deep. And we can't forget about ISIS either, right? They've been quiet, but all this change could be their chance to come back.
Yeah, right. You got to worry about that. ISIS, they love chaos. The U.S. has troops in eastern Syria, but who knows how long that'll last. If they pull out, boom, vacuum. Perfect for ISIS to exploit. And then there's the question of HTS. How will they handle ISIS? Can they even fight them effectively? Or does their whole ideology make them vulnerable?
Tough spot for the international community too. Want to help Syria, but also got to deal with the security risks, right? So what now? Where do we go from here? What are the possibilities for Syria's future?
Well, things are moving fast. Hard to say for sure. One possibility, HTS takes control, establishes a regime, probably authoritarian, but maybe stable. They've been pretty pragmatic in Idlib, so maybe they try to do that on a national level.
But their background, right? Jihadists. Can they really change that much? Become responsible rulers? Protect minorities? Rule of law? All that? Can we trust them?
Big question. Time will tell, I guess. What they've done in Idlib gives you some hope. But then there are those reports. Human rights abuses, limiting free speech, imposing their version of Islamic law.
Not exactly a clean record then. They can govern, sure,
Yeah.
but their past, their ideology, still there. What else could happen? Could the old regime make a comeback?
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, maybe a new, more democratic movement?
Could happen. Maybe not right away, though. The Assad people, maybe they'll try to regroup, especially if Russia or Iran back them up. But it'd be tough. No popular support, lots of mistrust after all they did.
And a new democratic uprising, like 2011,
Mm-hmm.
people taking to the streets, wanting a government that actually represents them.
Not impossible, but really hard. After all these years, people are tired, traumatized, and the divisions, they run deep. Getting everyone on the same page, pushing for change like that, in this environment, it'd be incredibly difficult.
So most likely, more uncertainty, fragile peace, maybe some violence here and there, long, slow process to rebuild.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But even with all that uncertainty, there are signs of hope. Groups, civil society, they're working hard. Aid, reconciliation, trying to build a better, fairer society.
It's amazing, isn't it? That kind of resilience after all they've been through.
It is, and it shows you, the Syrian people, they're the ones who'll decide what happens next. International support matters, sure, but ultimately, it's their future.
So what about us, people watching this, listening? What can we do to help? Support the Syrian people? How do we contribute to, a better future for them?
A few things. First, stay informed. This situation, it's complicated, always changing. Got to keep up, avoid those simple explanations, right? And support the groups doing the work. Aid, peace building, all that.
What about talking to our representatives?
Oh.
Pushing for policies that actually help. Diplomacy, human rights, stuff that actually addresses the needs of the Syrian people.
Yeah, absolutely. Our voices matter. Use them to push for a better approach to this whole thing. And we can learn more about Syria, The culture, the people, challenge those stereotypes, and, well, just try to understand.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed by it all, right?
Oh.
But every little bit helps. Staying informed, supporting the aid groups, advocating for good policies, that's how we make a difference.
And speaking of stories, there was this one really stuck with me. You remember those government buildings going up in smoke right before Assad disappeared? The immigration office, the passport place in Damascus. Everyone was wondering if they were burning files.
Yeah, that was all over the news. Seemed like a last-ditch effort to, like, cover their tracks, get rid of evidence, human rights stuff, maybe some other shady business. What do you think was going on there?
Well, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What were they hiding? And what about the files that didn't burn? Where are they now? Who's got them? What could they tell us about how Assad really ran things?
That's like a spy movie, seriously. Burning files, secret archives, a whole regime gone. What happens next? Any chance those files could, like, resurface? Give us some answers?
It's possible, and if they did, man, it could change everything. How we understand what happened in Syria. Imagine the stories in those files, the brutality, the corruption, how they held on to power for so long.
It's just crazy to think about a regime so powerful, so secretive, and now reduced to burning papers, trying to erase their past. Makes you think about power, doesn't it? How quickly it can change, how easily it can slip away. What do you think? What will Assad's legacy be?
Too soon to say, really. But I think, yeah, he'll be remembered for the brutality, the repression, all that suffering he caused. But we can't forget about the Syrian people either, how they survived, their strength.
You're right, the whole time, from those first protests through the war and now this chaotic transition, they never gave up hope. That desire for freedom, it never went out.
Exactly. And moving forward, it's got to be about them, their voices, their hopes, their dreams for their country, what they want the future to look like.
So, to everyone listening to this deep dive, keep digging. This story, it's not over. Look for those Syrian voices, the real stories. Those are the ones that remind us what's at stake. The human cost of conflict, but also the power of hope, of never giving up.
Why?
The story of Syria, it's still being written.